Again, hi everyone, welcome. My name is Blair Embry. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Prison Yoga Project. This series is called The Invitation, where we have an opportunity to speak to Prison Yoga Project facilitators. And I'm really excited about our guest today, Miranda Hope, joining us from Virginia. Hi, Miranda.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Blair.
So happy
everyone.
Speaking with you again. And I just have a little bio I'll read about Miranda, and then we'll pass over the mic for a mindfulness opportunity. Miranda is a writer and performing singer, songwriter living in Rappahannock County, Virginia. She attended Stanford University and Columbia University, getting an MFA in theater and acting, and has worked mostly as a teacher and counselor for the last 20 years. She is a member of Warriors at Ease and Prison Yoga Project and offers weekly therapeutic yoga and meditation classes to wounded veterans and the incarcerated. She is honored to serve as vice president of the foundation started by her grandfather, the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, or the Bob Hope Foundation. Welcome, Miranda. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. What an honor it is to be here talking about this, which really is one of my favorite subjects. And to feel the sense of Sangha. I'll never forget, it was 2016 when Jamie Foxx announced to the 100 of us that had gathered in San Diego that we were now a part of the Prison Yoga Project Sangha. And I take that so seriously. I really feel that in my heart, because I think as yoga teachers, we can get isolated. We can go and teach our classes and have our 10 students or 100 students, but it's still, we're doing something very profound, very healing, very deep, offering this gift, serving. And for me, it fills me. It really fills and heals me when I teach yoga. But sometimes it can feel like I'm just on the outside. There are my students, and then there's me. But I always knowing that there's this worldwide Sangha that I'm a part of, and that I'm sending love to whenever I make these offerings, whenever I reach back into my notes and sources from that training and other trainings and, the teachings. I just feel that connection. So I just want to welcome everybody. And I hope that this will be a beneficial time for you.
Thank you, Miranda.
And should we start with the centering?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay. Well, how exciting. Everybody's everywhere. I see the Netherlands, I see Oakland, I see more Virginia, Colorado, Western Australia. It's like we're just wrapping the globe right now in this intention. So if it feels right for you, I invite you to close your eyes or to look down. Find your own practice. Allow the rest of the world to just be on the other side of a door right now. Just consciously moving, almost traveling from that head to the heart. And then please bring your awareness to that breath. 24,000 times a day we breathe. Each breath is perfect. Then I invite you to bring your awareness to the moment right before the inhale. And just be in that space right before the inhale. Notice that there's a need. Your body has a need. And then notice how gently that need is filled. There's no gasping. There's no hoarding. There's no wondering if there will be enough. There's just a need, and the need is filled. And it's filled 24,000 times a day. I find that optimistic. I find it points to an undeniable engine inside of us that is powerful, but gentle and perfect. Undeniable. And the thing that fuels this perfect, undeniable, powerful, and gentle engine is life force, calling. It's almost as though you're not even doing it, but that life is breathing itself through you perfectly, powerfully, gently, 24,000 times a day. And then there is this question, what will I do with this? How will I steer it? This powerful engine. And those of us in this particular Sangha, we steer it towards service. And when we do that, things get very clear, very purposeful. And then we make of our lives an offering, an unfolding, and a healing. As you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Thank you.
And I'll just give a couple more moments of silence for people to come back into the room with this powerful visualization. I was imagining that that I was a massive cargo ship being pulled by a tugboat of service. So really, thank you for that beautiful visualization and to remind us why we're here, yoga as service. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Once again, this is the invitation and our guest today is Miranda Hope, who just led us in a really beautiful centering and mindfulness practice. Before her and I start to engage in some dialogue, I'll just go over the agenda for today. So Miranda and I will speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open the room up to questions. And we like to give the floor first to anyone who has experienced incarceration or anyone who has been directly affected by incarceration. And you'll be able to ask your question verbally. When you look down at your Zoom screen, there will be a raise hand button kind of in the middle on the lower right. And you'll be able to click the raised hand button and we'll be able to call on you and you'll be able to ask your question verbally. And then when we open the floor to the general audience, you'll be able to ask your question through the Q&A box, which is the button next to the raise hand, and you'll be able to type your question in that chat box. If you have any other questions in the meantime, you're welcome to put your question in the chat box, and Priscilla will be able to answer any questions along the way. So again, thank you everyone for being here, and welcome again, Miranda.
Thank you.
Yeah, checking in from Virginia, and I heard the story and I really love it, but what was your first experience or first contact with yoga?
My first contact with yoga, I was at Columbia. I was doing a actor's MFA in theater, and we had to take a weekly yoga class, and I didn't like it at all. I mean, it wasn't that I hated it. I just felt like it was a waste of time. Stretching, like I just didn't have any. I didn't have any connection to what I was doing there, and I thought I should be vocal training or dance training or something useful. And then my teacher, she was so amazing because she did privates with each one of us, and so I came in for my private, which I also thought was going to be a waste of time, and we did some yoga. And then she said, I'm not really sure how central your yoga practice is for you. And I said, well, it's not core at all. It's not, I don't do it ever. And she said, okay, well, I'm just curious if you've ever wanted, from your toes to your head and down your arms and through your fingertips, if you ever wanted to feel like one whole and complete person full of creative potential. And I said, well, what, yoga can do that? And she said, that's what yoga is. And that changed everything for me. And I started just to do yoga in a different way. I know this is not an uncommon story. A lot of people come into yoga through just the physical, or they've had an injury, or they're told that they'll be faster or happier for doing yoga. So they just go through the motions of the pose, but then there's this intention, right? There's this this quieting, this moving from the chattery small self into the larger, expansive self. But that chattery small self is so compelling and sticky, and we just want to live in our thoughts until that really turns into a cage or a prison cell in its own right. So that was the beginning, very lukewarm.
And we had spoken previously about the service and the selflessness of teachers. And I would love an opportunity for you to talk about anyone that has really inspired your yoga or meditation journey.
Well, I think I hope I speak for other people, but I'll just speak for myself that without yoga and meditation and the teachers that I've been so fortunate to find myself at the feet of, I'm not sure I'd be alive. I'm just so grateful. And it started with that woman, don't even remember her name, 22 years ago. And then moving through, I trained with, my first was with Integral Yoga, my 200-hour, and I had a beautiful teacher named Surya he was a hockey player. I mean, he just had a wonderful way. I feel like I have found the teachers that are going to bring yoga to me in a way that is going to be really accessible to me. So he was a hockey player and a very beautiful, beautiful man. So he was the first. And then I've gone on, I just received my 500-hour from J.J. Gormley in Virginia. And she is the real deal. She is in the lineage of Krishnamacharya and Desikachar. Basically goes Krishnamacharya, Desikachar's son, JJ. Like, and Krishnamacharya was the one who got yoga from a man in a cave. It almost didn't make it into the world again, but there was a man in a cave who taught Krishnamacharya yoga. So the man in the cave, Krishnamacharya, Jessica Char's son, JJ. She's in Virginia. She teaches yoga therapy. She teaches 500-hour, 200-hour. She's a gift. She's a gift to our world. So I bow to her. And then Bo Forbes up in Boston and Leslie Kaminoff in New York. And I've had to do a lot of my training online because I have a son that has health challenges. So I haven't been able to go in person much. And then of course, Jamie Foxx. I love his training. I love the way that he presents all this. So, and then as far as meditation, I did practice transcendental meditation and sort of weave my way through all kinds of mindfulness practices. And lately, Adyashanti, goes by Adya, but Adyashanti is a Buddhist monk that I've been reading a good bit about and reading his teachings. It's like a wave, right? You take one step into that ocean and you're just suddenly carried on a wave that is made up of extraordinary ideas and the teachers that transmit them.
And I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting to see the container that our teachers show up as, right? Like this hockey player. And I think probably everyone in this room is right. It's like we step into this space and then we're immediately hungry. We see how maybe void our life was before coming to yoga or mindfulness, or we are more aware of what we want. And even if the want is just like, I want space and time to sit with my own being. And we have this complete priority shift.
Yeah.
Just the most important thing is for me to sit in my own awareness. And when I have my own awareness practice, whether that's yoga or meditation, that the practice is the priority and it affects the rest of our lives and it affects all of our relationships, I think, in positive benefit, really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's that thing it's what we're trying to transmit to, right, as teachers, where there's this big chattering head, and then this tiny little sense of there might be something else, and then it's we want more and more of the something else and less of the chattering head. But that takes time, it takes faith, and like you said, it takes practice, commitment.
And the faith part is really interesting because when you said it takes faith, I actually see me like almost this idea of like finding your mat as refuge, of just like every time just like falling and falling and falling, and just remembering to stay humble every time we fall or every time we think we are someone, and we are reminded of our softness. And so just remembering to stay soft and open.
I think that's so good, Blair. Sometimes when I get to my mat or I teach a class, it's like, hello, Matt. Like I seem to be washing up on your shore, like I'm some kind of, dragging myself through the sand, having not, been just pummeled by life and haven't had anything to drink in 3 days, I don't mean alcohol, I just mean water, right? Like just something out of some Tom Hanks movie, just like, ugh.
Yeah. A dried-up sea creature rolling onto your mat.
Yeah, just completely. Right.
Yes. And also how this daily practice then becomes our refuge, right? Yeah. And so I think it's common for us to, maybe we take larger breaks and we're coming back, right? Like this ocean tide, and always returning back to our mat and returning back to our practice.
Yeah.
So thanks for that visualization too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And speaking of how, when we step into this work, how our teachers change and the vessel of these teachers change. And I know that you have taught in prisons and jails for a while, teaching and offering this work as facilitation. And I would love to hear about how your look of teachers or your view of teachers changed when you came into facilities.
Well, I want to say to everybody on this call that I really needed to go before I was ready. You're never going to feel ready to walk into a jail, I don't think. You may feel a readiness, but you're not going to feel 100% like, okay, I'm super comfortable with this idea, right? That's just for the first time you walk in. After that, it's different. At least it was for me. But that first time, so I just want to encourage everybody to trust that you have a superpower within you. You may not know it yet, and it may be the participants in your class that teach it to you. And that's how it went for me, that my students became my teachers. And, when I trained with the warriors at ease, it applies to teaching to the incarcerated as well, because we have to acknowledge that on one side, we have us, we have yoga. And in yoga, we believe in a inner guide. And many of us who are yoga teachers, of course, not all, but we are white women of either middle or upper income. And we tend to be liberal. We tend to be of a democratic persuasion in America. That's a more liberal persuasion. And then we are teaching to people who believe maybe in a chain of command. And that would be for the military, but in jails, there's also a sense of, we're teaching to people who believe in a definite hierarchy. And then they're going to be men, many of color, many of lower income, and many of them have conservative beliefs. And so we have to be the bridge. And if we package it properly, we're offering as yoga teachers to this population, if we package it properly, we are likely to see something that looks like enlightenment within about a half an hour. And you can't quite believe that that's true, but people will receive this at the level that they need it. And not everybody, but you will see transformation in the first class, because there is so much tension, so much trauma, so much need for the gift that this is. And so we have to package it right. And, that may mean that we have to leave our Sanskrit at the door, at least for a little while. And it may mean that we have to get very down to earth, very real with what this is. And I think it's important to bring back the person that I was before I discovered yoga or meditation, or what it could do for me, how it could transform me. So I always bring in that student that I was, which was a bad student, a poor student, an unengaged student, someone who thought, like, I'd rather be anywhere else. And I bring that in to my introduction. I say, I know that doing yoga in jail may feel, and because before they came to my class in jail, they lined up, and everybody in their pod teased them for going to yoga class every single week. And they like to make sexual jokes about it, downward dog, whatever. And so they got ribbed every time in every pod. And they marched to my yoga class and had the courage to get on those mats and get what they knew they needed. But I wanted to say, I learned so much from my students. Also, I was teaching in the lockdown psych ward of the VA hospital with wounded veterans, some of them against their will. And so after a half hour chair yoga class, 45 minutes maybe, I would hear things like, I'm in here for chronic pain and I'm pain-free right now. Or I haven't been able to smell for 9 years and I can smell right now. Or one of my favorites that really taught me what yoga was or is, he said, I almost cried in your class, but I didn't. And I said, well, I'm so glad that that feels like an achievement to you. But in yoga, we believe that tears are pain leaving the body, and we welcome tears. And he said, no, I'm in here because I can't stop crying. And your class, I could stop crying. I didn't have to cry. And when I heard that, I thought, yes, yoga will give you what you need. For those that need to cry, it may help us to cry. And for those that need to stop crying, it will help us to stop crying. It will help those, and I never forget Jamie Foxx's, so beautiful, this spectrum of reactions we can have when something's coming towards us, from the passive to the receptive, to a kind of a neutral, to the assertive, to the aggressive. And I just see that for those that are leaning too far towards the passive and the receptive, they can find the assertive through warrior poses and backward bending poses. They're too aggressive or too assertive and never learned this whole landscape of the other side of that spectrum. They can learn to be more receptive. So it just brings what we need. And I think it was my students that really helped me to see that more clearly. And then I'm always, of course, always reading, always studying, always learning. It's endless, lifelong.
And I think that's so beautiful to, we don't do this for a reward, right? But to see a difference in the people that you're offering yoga to is inspiring, to say the least, right? It does fuel our offering of service. You're like, okay, like I am seeing people benefit, and it makes us want to show up again and again. And
well, it's part of a conversation, right? Like it's sometimes we're going to be on one side, we're going to be the one receiving and amazed and benefiting. And then sometimes we're going to be the one being just pointing, being like, take a look at this. And either way, we're in just different paradigm or different modality there than I am sort of for the rest of my day when I'm doing other things. I'm not a part of that sharing, that communication. And I'm glad you brought it up because I can't remember where I first heard the image, but as yoga teachers, we're just apple trees, right? We just make the fruit and it drops and some of it's going to rot. And, someone's going to come along and eat it who's not a good person, or the apple tree does not ask, are you a good person, are you a worthy person? Doesn't say, oh, that one rotted, I've lost an apple, it's gone to waste. No, it's just we make it, we put it out there, and non-attachment towards everything else. But that too it's a conversation. That too is an experience and a teaching.
And because I resonate with you when you say this, also a white woman, and who does a lot of different kinds of services. And I would just love to hear how you approach yoga as service, or any advice that you would give that's not like white saviorism, or that's not rescuing, or that's not bringing us into triangulation, that is this hierarchy, right? That like, I know more than you, which comes out in these subtle ways, right? So I guess it's kind of a big question, but yeah, what do you offer to people who want to offer yoga as service?
Such a good question, and something to be so mindful of. And for me, it comes down to kinship. I really felt there, I guess maybe a lot of people will have different reasons for not doing this work. And one was I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel worthy to go in, and I don't like to tell people what to do. I was a college and career counselor, and I'd never told anybody what to do because who am I? This is very spiritual work. And so I think that you spoke about being humble and small and bringing genuine kinship and human warmth, being very, very clear about what we're doing there. And again, James Fox talked about how if we come in thinking we're going to help or save or fix or change people, we have already set up a hierarchy. We've set up that we're going to pull them up to our level. And that has to be avoided. And I just know that my incarcerated students can just smell that. And when they walked in on that first day, I know there was a sense and an expectation that somebody was going to come in and tell them to shut up and sit down and learn something and be different. And so it is so refreshing. And refreshing in the way that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about refreshing, just refreshing to be with someone, just human to human on our short time on this planet, not asking, what did you do? But asking, who are you? And maybe even what happened to you? And even not overtly, I'm not asking those questions, but just this curiosity and this warmth. And then we're in the land of kinship. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to read a little quote on kinship. Gregory Boyle, people in Los Angeles and in America may know about Father Greg Boyle, Jesuit priest, worked with gang members for the last 20 years in Los Angeles in the Dolores mission, where he was placed. And he talks about kinship. He says, as Mother Teresa said, the problem in the world is that we have forgotten that we belong to one another. So we hope, I'm so moved by this. So we hope to inch our way out to the margin. We hope to. So that we can stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. We can stand with those whose dignity has been denied and with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. Occasionally, you get really fortunate and you get to stand with the easily despised, the demonized, so that the demonizing will stop. And with the disposable, so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. This is a privilege. This is an honor to stand with them. We obliterate once and for all the illusion that we're separate. No us and them, just us. Kinship is the game changer. It is the pearl of great price. It is the treasure buried in the field. Let's sell everything to get it. That is from Greg Boyle. He did a TED Talk. You can watch his TED Talk. Just look up Greg, Boyle. But that's it. The whole thing flips on its head. We are not there to change. We're not there for us. We are there to serve, to get so small, just get so humble. And I remember I have this friend and she saw me driving and she knew that it was the day that I went to teach at the jail. And she was going to wave, but then she said, oh, I don't want to wave because Miranda's probably preparing herself and putting her armor on to go into the jail. So I'm not going to distract her by waving. And I said, no, I'm taking the armor off, right? And I know this will resonate with a lot of people who work in this field. I wouldn't dream of showing up with armor. That's not kinship. That's not connection. That's not celebrating the opportunity to come and stand by those who feel they have been discarded and thrown away and put in exile and forgotten. Okay, Blair, can I tell a story? Can I tell a story? It's my favorite. It's one of my favorite stories. So there's this guy, Paul. I ended up working in a addiction recovery pod with 55 male participants. And I'm walking up, and Paul was a kind of drug kingpin of a nearby city. And he had a major anger management problem. And he's an older guy. He's about, 55. And he's in there, and I'm walking in, and I always brought my guitar, and I always brought my sort of bag, little handouts. And you'll notice when you work in this field that the corrections officers are all suited up. They've got their heavy shoes, they've got their Kevlar vests, they've got their belts and their mace and their pepper spray and their handcuffs and their radios, and basically I'm walking in there in my pajamas. And and then I take off my shoes, and 55 male participants, and this correctional officer escorting me through one door, lock, slam, and then we're waiting at the next door, and we can see that across the room there's Paul, and he's standing up in this room of 55 people, and he is, I don't know if this is going to work on Zoom, but he is yelling at somebody across the room, and he is so intense, and he's yelling, and I'm standing there with my guitar in my bag, and the correctional officer next to me, and he says, like talking into his radio, and then he says, I can't let you in right now. This is not a good time. And I said, no, I know what this looks like. We can't hear what Paul is saying. He's like, I know what this looks like, but you got to let me in. And he's like, no, it's not safe right now. And I'm like, no, you got to let me in. That's love. It's love. I know it's love. We got to get in there. So sure enough, the door opens, and there's Paul, and he's yelling at somebody across the room, and he's saying, you matter to me. Your story matters to me, and it matters to all of us. And I love you. And, it's just like, and I'm like, yeah, told you. And go in, sit down. I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of that room, Who would I be to say, I am now going to teach everybody something. I am now going to fix everybody and change everybody. It's sacred. It's the most sacred room I've ever been in. That room. I hope this is encouraging to those listening. We've taken 2.3 million people and put them in cages, and they're people. And they are people who have lost all of their identities, their jobs, their clothing, their name, their books, their family, their children, their pets, their everything. And many of them have shaved their heads. And so in this way, a yoga ashram and a jail could be kind of a perfect merging.
The causes and conditions, right? So much of our practice, so much of our life is based on causes and conditions.
Yeah.
And when you talk about people being discarded and forgotten, that's also why I feel drawn to doing this work, because no one should be thrown out.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone should be thrown out. And I think that everyone in this room agrees.
It's so moving. I'm so moved by that. And for those who have felt thrown under the bus, crumpled up and thrown away, second or third class, or that in any way that their life is less worthy than another. And I have felt that. And I'll just say my own personal experience by having a child who had illness, autism, couldn't speak, and aggressive, And there was no place for us. We were living in San Diego. There was not one place we could go other than the waiting room of a therapy office. But the rest of the world was closed to us. We couldn't go to restaurants. We couldn't go to the zoo. We couldn't go to the SeaWorld. We couldn't get on a bus. We couldn't stay home, and we couldn't leave. And that's how I spent almost 6 years, certainly 3 solid years. And there were no friends for us, and there was nothing. And I think I tap into that too. When I offer, because I was through yoga, that's when yoga got real for me. So that's what I think that's when the fire was really lit, to say, no, we got to show up for one another. Nobody discarded, as you say, nobody left out, nobody second class. Let me go back to that perfect engine within us, that 24,000 breaths a day, a miracle, with that intention, and that it's gentle and it's strong. And every single person on this planet has that. It's where we start from. We're all worthy. And then the thing that happened for me when I heard the stories of trauma, what these heroes that are encaged, what they have had to carry, what they have had to experience, what has been put upon them in this life to endure. The problem for me was not thinking that I was better than them. The problem was me looking up. It's not a problem, but like, to get back to that kinship of just feeling unworthy to even begin to address the complex trauma that they feel, right? So my challenge was knowing what they'd been through, and we're talking, of course, of unspeakable abuse, neglect, all of the adverse childhood events, to get to that point of kinship of, well, here we are, we're humans, we can breathe, we can bring warmth, we can bring dignity. We can point to something in each one of our participants that is not addicted to anything, that is not broken, that capital S self, that witness self, it's called different things. But if we can help them, again, sometimes it's just pointing, if we can help them to see that they're not, because a lot of them just think they're junky trash. And I put that in quotes because that is exactly what one of my participants said. This yoga class is the first time in my life that I have not felt like junky trash. Because I'm over here whispering, you're whole, you're a miracle, you're beautiful, you're a warrior, you're a survivor. We all are, you are too. And that's the fact that he would believe me is such an honor. Yeah, I think all of that, Blair, I hope it goes back to what you were saying about not coming in with hierarchy, not coming in, increasing the sense of dominance and oppression. Just coming in a completely different way. Just if it's love, it's probably on the right track.
I'm just over here trying not to cry and have snot all over my face. And the way when you speak and when you share story, I just am immediately transported into almost a meditative state. And I think it's quite difficult sometimes for me to not talk. And so you really bring out this beautiful listening quality within me. So
thank you.
It feels like I'm not responding. I'm
no.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I think I'll ask you one more question and then we'll open it up to our audience. What made you approach wounded warriors, or what was the call for you and Prison Yoga Project, right? Like what was that motivation? What was that direction, that the tugboat, right? Like in addition to yoga as service, but like what made you pick up the phone or walk in?
Yeah, I wish I had, I have a, I can tell you the timeline. I'm glad you used a tugboat analogy, because that in this image, I think I am the big broken down, the Suez Canal. I think I'm that ship, frequently. I was raised, we look at our upbringing, right? So I was just raised to live in my head and to achieve. I mean, honestly, my beautiful mother woke me up every morning by saying, "Rise and shine, another day in which to excel." that was the wake up. And I asked her later in my 20s, I was like, "What is that? Where'd you get that thing?" And she said, "Oh, I got that from West Point." So here I am, this like 6-year-old girl getting rise and shine, another day in which to excel. So I'm that tugboat. I'm like slammed, I'm blocking the Suez Canal with thinking and doing. And if there's ever a problem, add more thinking. And if the thinking ever gets really tough and anxious and racing, add more thinking, just that practice. And so for me, there was a tugboat that showed up, and it's quiet and it's compassionate. It's full of kinship for me. And it's just like, come on, here we go. Like we're going to stop blocking the Suez Canal now. But I was teaching I knew I had to get back to teaching yoga because I wasn't even sane anymore. I was someone who couldn't stop crying. Like I was in that state of complete fight or flight or freeze or fuse, slammed into my sympathetic nervous system with this situation, with this child who was hitting and kicking and spitting and screaming and nonverbal, and walking around beautiful San Diego, where everybody's, very put together, with 2 black eyes because I'd been like, he'd arch back and slam into my nose, with a child, just 16 hours a day and then 8 hours a night, just this situation that was my life. So I was like, I need an hour a week to go and teach some yoga. So yoga called to me. And then one of my students was working in the VA, and she said, "I'm going to make you my project." And I was like, "I wish you would." And so that was it. She didn't tell me she was in the psych ward. She just said, you're going to come talk to my patients." I'm like, yes, I am. Yes. Okay. So we did that. She was so beautiful. And then I was teaching for the Y, and I showed up. It was confusing. I had to go to some kind of twice a year, I had to go to some training, and it was confusing. I showed up late. I missed the training. There was one other person who showed up late, and I was like, "Do you want to just get a coffee?" And she said, we sat and had a coffee, and she worked for the Prison Yoga Project and in San Diego. And she's like, "You know what you should do?" And I was like, "Thank you." So it's really, it seems, looking back, it seems arbitrary how I ended up so far down this path. And I think I just ended up so far down this path because despite my everything else, my feet just kept walking down this path. I think that's what happened. I don't know. I'm so humble about it. I'm so grateful. It was such a, again, I think it saved my life, probably saved my marriage. It saved my soul. I feel deeply, deeply humbled by it.
And that's so beautiful that it started of you just being like, I need an hour. It was like the thing that you needed to do for yourself, and how it transformed into a whole path of other, right? Of other, right?
Yeah.
Like of doing this as service.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how kismet, right? That like you were late and this person arose, right? That you got this coffee with. And
yeah.
And I feel like that's so many stories that how did you get involved with Prison Yoga Project, or how did you find yoga, right? It's through these stories that seem very unassuming, but that actually take us down a completely different road.
Yeah. And that's right. And for me too, it's because I could have had that conversation and with everything on my plate, just been like, I'll do that some other time. But then it starts to live in me, this necessity, well, I'm going to look it up. Oh, would you look at that? There's a training. Oh, I'm going to have to hire some babysitters and make this happen. And every step of the way, it was like, I can't do this. I can't do it now. I have nothing to give. I'm so drained. I'm a shell of a person. Who am I to be able to offer anything to anyone? And then it's the pick up the phone and, make the call and sign up for the thing and pay the money and make it happen. And that is, that's bigger than me. That's despite me.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
That's
beautiful and comedic.
I mean, I can't take credit for any of this.
Just it's part of that deep listening of being led.
Yeah. There's a letting go. And what I wanted to say too, because that first time, and I want to say when to everybody on this call, that first time when you write an email or a letter or make a call to a superintendent or to a volunteer coordinator at a facility, it might feel a little difficult, a little stressful, a little uncertain, a little scary. And that first moment that I was in the right before my class started, I wasn't having a full-blown panic attack, because that's not inspiring when people are walking to a yoga class. The yoga teacher's like having a full-blown panic attack. So I was kind of close, and I was imagining like, hitting, there's a big red duress button on the wall, and I'm just like, I'm gonna hit that thing and they're gonna get me out of here, and the last thing they're gonna see of me is just running back of my head, running back to my car. I can't do this. And then there's some horrific noise when the door opens. It's like ka-chunk, and then the door opens, and your 15 students walk in, and you look at them and you see that they're human. They're sad, they're pale, they're not properly, I won't say they're not properly nourished, because in this jail, the food was actually quite conscious, but they just are a little broken, and you have something to glue them back together. And that's about what it felt like for me. And then they'll surprise you. They'll say, no, I don't know if anybody here has experienced yoga before. And then one woman's going to shoot her hand up and say, well, I really like the theories of Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, because when he's talking about, please instruct me, it like happens very quickly. And then that same woman, whose name is Brandy, I just adore, she's going to say, and if you're Christian, you can get a priest in here day or night, but if you're Buddhist, you can't. And I think we should have a Buddhist priest in here. And I'm like, well, I agree with you, Brandy. And she's like, I think you should be the Buddhist priest. And I'm like, well, my studies of Buddhism are very much the big. And she goes, and in the jail, I went by Mandy. She goes, I believe in you, Mandy. So once again, I'm 3 minutes in. I've gone from like panic attack to total compassion and kinship, to like having found my life coach. Okay, that was 3 minutes in Brandy, who's got she's got Thich Nhat Hanh like stacked up on her little mat. So we just don't know. We don't know. We come in humble. We come in curious. We don't feel ready. We walk through those 4 locked doors. we take off our shoes, we show up in our pajamas, and just wait for this sacred space to form around us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I feel like at this time, we want to open questions up to be asked verbally. So anyone who has been incarcerated or has been directly impacted by incarceration, we would love to offer the floor to you first. And how you can ask a question directly to Miranda is through the raise hand button down at your Zoom screen, and we'll be able to call on you. Let's see. Okay. And we're going to call on Bernard first. Let's see how this works. Okay, great. And then Bernard, you'll be able to unmute. Awesome. And Bernard, whenever you're ready, we should be able to hear you now. Just give it one more moment. Bernard, are you there? Unfortunately, if you are speaking, we can't hear you. So we're going to call on the next person. And when you do have your audio figured out, we would love to hear your question. And if you can hear us in this moment, you're also welcome to put you're there. Okay, we see. Bernard, you're there. Unfortunately, we can't hear your audio in this moment. Would you mind putting your question or any comment in the chat, and I'll be able to speak that out loud? I'm sorry that the audio is not working. Okay, and we'll wait while Bernard puts their question or their conversation into the chat, and we can call on the next person. If there's anyone else that would like to ask a question verbally, again, anyone who's been directly impacted by incarceration, we do call you to the floor first. Give it a moment. Okay, and while we wait for Bernard, I think in this moment, because I don't see anyone else with their hand raised, we can start asking questions to our larger audience. So we can open this up to everyone. And how you can ask a question for our general audience is the Q&A box down at the bottom of our Zoom link, and you'll be able to put your question in the box. I see a lot of people were asking questions throughout, so thank you everyone who was answering these questions, mostly just about Prison Yoga Project generally. So any questions right now that we have for Miranda, you can open into the box. And if we don't have any questions, I'm happy to just keep chatting with you, but we'll give it a minute.
I think you're gonna have a question on Zoom. I'm watching the chat, and so just know that that may be coming. Or not Zoom, sorry, Facebook.
On Facebook. Okay, thanks, Nicole. Miranda, what was this is from me. I'm just engaging in more conversation.
Sure.
Okay, you spoke about this earlier, that you're staying in contact with the participants from the program because we haven't been able to be doing in-person programming. Will you just talk about what you've been offering to your former students as far as
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, every week when I taught, I brought in a little handout, and it had to be two-sided. It had to be black and white because just in case the inmates would take the ink from my handouts and make tattoos out of the ink. And so black and white handouts, I send them about once a month now. Because it's been a year, jails, there's so much transition. It's such a population. Sometimes people stay 6 days, usually not more than a year, but in some cases. So it's been 14 months. But I still have 16 students in there. And of course, some left and came back. And I think with relapse and knowing about addiction, knowing that relapse is a part of addiction, knowing that addicts, people with substance use disorders, relapse at about the same rate as people with diabetes. I mean, it's just, once we say that addiction is a disease and that relapse is a part of the disease, we know that our former participants we're going to see them back inside. So I send in, I think I have one here, but I send in I try to make something funny because they really like the funny ones. But then I also try to be inspiring without being too, woo-woo. And then I send them a meditation, and I send them a letter. I'm not allowed to write to them individually. So I just write to them from my heart. The whole goal is to make them feel worthy, to let them know that that someone out here has not forgotten about them, feel less thrown away, all of that. So I try to do that. And I also don't want to burden the jail. There's a kind of a dicey thing where I want them to have me back really badly. So I don't want to create a bunch of work for them, running around all the different pods where my students are. So, but yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to call Bernard back in. So in the chat, I'm going to read his response.
Great.
So we have, well, as a 20-year-old, I was incarcerated as total objector of military service for 9 months. I was 44 when I discovered yoga, or the other way around. It was only then that I realized how yoga could have helped me in this period of incarceration. This was also the motivation, again, years later, to teach in prison. I recognize a lot of what Miranda is telling in my experience in the West Zaan prison near Amsterdam, Netherlands. It was mixed. What is going to happen? But also I feel a real drive to do this work. Thank you, Bernard, for sharing your story. Thank you. And we have a couple other questions popping in. We have Hannah. Hannah shares, I have had several siblings admitted to psych wards, and I know that patients are also held under a very strict hierarchy there as well. Do you have any stories about yoga alleviating some of the psychological pain of students who struggle with mental illness? Thank you, Hannah, so much for this question.
I feel, yeah, I do. I do. I feel that yoga is perfectly poised to help people in collaboration with therapy and or medication, to help people with mental illness. Again, I was only there for an hour a week, so that's not going to be enough to, this, if they can take it on every day, but I feel like that path that I took, even the path that we took with the centering today, to move from the head to the heart, to move from something that feels broken and dysfunctional to something that feels this perfect engine, this evidence that no matter how much feels wrong with us, there's always more right with us than wrong with us. It just depends on where we're looking. And so with racing thoughts, with damaging thoughts, with voices, with ideation, with the crippling experience of mental illness in many of its forms, if we can bring the awareness to, again, the part of us that's not broken, the part of us that's not addicted to anything, and just take some healing from that. I guess that's how I feel about it. But I really like what Blair said in the beginning, is that this mat, this practice, this daily practice, this washing up on its shore practice. That's, I believe, where the healing really happens. So I can't take any credit for magical cures that lasted for a lifetime for somebody, but maybe we can just show. The thing I like about yoga with people who are experiencing mental illness is that we can show a different way, can show a different relationship to the thoughts, a different relationship to the body, a relationship to the past. And once we can show it, then maybe it can be chosen or not chosen. But I don't want to minimize in any way the experience of people with mental illness. It is ongoing, typically, and it takes a lot of support. But I always felt comfortable with coming in with it because I'm not diagnosing anything, and I'm not waving cures around, and I'm not taking their money, for anything that I'm saying. And so I'm just bringing, when in doubt, bring kindness. When in doubt, bring compassion. When in doubt, bring love. Just be this human example that maybe they've never experienced before, of someone who just, I don't need them to get over their mental illness to come to class. Bring your whole self, bring all the diagnoses, just bring it all in, and we'll just be human together. And that eases mental illness. I think unconditional high regard can ease some of the symptoms. But of course, I'm not a doctor, not even a therapist. So, yeah.
You're holding the space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like radical allowing.
Yeah.
And I think this might be Gita. So I have a question that would pair really beautifully with this is what would be your suggestion on the first class?
Of how to handle the first class.
Yeah. Maybe there's a specific technique that you share. When I work with children, oftentimes we create an umbrella of respect, right? We're kind of creating the space together. So how do you create the space together?
I think it's nice to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that they may or may not have ever done any yoga before. They may have just left a room where everybody laughed at them and made fun of them for coming into this space. And to, I'll say one thing that I like to say is everything in this class is optional. You don't have to do a single one of these poses. You can lie down and take a nap if that's what you need to do. This may be the only space in your life where you feel safe enough to sleep. So please feel free to sleep. And you can do these poses. If there's a pose you like, you can stay in it longer. If there's a pose you don't like, you don't have to do it. You can do something else. You don't even have to stay in this circle. You can drag your mat. If this circle makes you uncomfortable, just drag your mat over to the other side of the room. Because I feel that enough options have been taken from you. And I can't feel good about myself if I walk in here and boss you around. Also, I'm just the human teacher. I don't matter. You have a far deeper and wiser teacher within you that I would much prefer you listen to if there's anything that is in conflict between this teacher and the one inside of you. So please listen to the teacher inside of you. And please do what feels best to you in this hour. And I get pretty much immediate buy-in then, because nobody is saying that to them. And with the warrior population that I worked with, I would say, I know you may think that I'm, who's this lady coming in with yoga? But one of the heroes of yoga is Arjuna. He was one of the finest warriors of his time. And on the day of the great battle, he went out with his chariot and his God in the back, and they walked to the battlefield. And as the sun is rising, they assess the enemy before them, because he wants to size them up before the day of the great battle. And he looks and he sees that the enemy is his teachers and his friends and his community and himself and his ideas and his connections. And he realizes in that moment that the battlefield is this big. It's between the ears. And then all I have to say is, let's put our feet on the ground. They're in. They're like, okay, that's when the chain of command really works for you, because it doesn't matter what ridiculous thing you're going to ask them to do. They have to do it. So put our feet on the ground and it's time to get started, right? But yeah, you can come in, it's not a pitch, but you need to get buy-in, and you need to get it quickly. And so I know you'll find your way. But I can't tell you, it's just like with acting. When people audition, you know whether they're going to get the part before they even open their mouths. You just know. And it's the same thing. They see that in you, in your body language, in your intention, in how you welcome them into the class, in that first moment of eye contact. It's hard. If you come in with this curious love, this is kinship, this same level, you're already in. You don't have to lift up yoga or put it down. They're just, they're in a safe space, like you said, Blair. They're in a safe container, and they haven't been in one maybe ever.
What I feel like the visualization that I'm getting is that, like, maybe it's the first inhale or exhale during the class, maybe that they've taken in a really, really long time. So even just a place to be able to come and be.
It's so true. It breaks my heart, but it's so true.
Yeah.
They may have never taken a full breath. Maybe the one when they were born. And then maybe not many since then.
I want to read, Laura has a really beautiful piece that she put in the chat that I just wanted to say for you, Miranda, so you can hear it. Thank you so much for sharing your story about your experience as a mother. You are such a beautiful person, and I can only imagine how people must experience themselves in your presence in your classes. I feel open and hopeful and filled with spirit listening to you. I'm so grateful to have this experience with you this morning. Inspiring. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We had some feedback from Bernard. I once had a guy in class who remained all class sitting in meditation. After class, he apologized for not participating in the asana practice. I thanked him for doing the best yoga practice of all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I had an experience where I said that, and a woman was like, all right, I'm going to sleep. And then, because there are cameras in the room, there are no correctional officers in the room, but there are cameras. And so sometimes my class gets watched, and I never know when. Mm-hmm. And the correctional officer came on the mic. It's all so jarring, and it was just like, wake up, you need to participate or you can't be in the class. And I was like, excuse me for a moment, class. And I went over to the thing, and it was the only time that I actually had to confront the system to defend this woman's right to sleep. But you feel, I will say, when you work in, at least when I do, I feel like there is a Venn diagram of punishment and healing. That building is for punishment and containment and confinement. Yoga is for healing and expansion. And it is very interesting to try to live in the space between those two circles. There's not much overlap. So, right, when we just let somebody not participate, and we don't call that rude, and we celebrate that, and we say, that is what you needed to do today, we're doing something radical. In that space, and in many others, we're doing something unfamiliar, almost illegal. Just joking.
And Andrea stops in, and Andrea, this is a really great question, and I think it's part of a larger conversation, but I want to open it up now, is how do you keep the space safe? And what if something did occur to make it unsafe? And yeah, we talk about this as just an insight or some background in the facilitators here. We talk about, what's safe space, or is it more of a brave space? Right? That we actually can't make anyone feel anything, but there are ways that we can make it as safe as possible. What's the languaging that you would use, Miranda?
Yeah. That's a great question. What is a safe space? And I love how you took that to ask what, we're not making, again, if we want to make people feel a certain thing, we're not necessarily in a safe space, So I guess I don't know the answer to this question, and I haven't had any challenges at all with safety. I taught about 250 classes in the VA and 250 classes in the jail. And the only time I felt threatened was by another teacher. She was in there teaching GED classes. And I don't know why she was so angry or threatened by me, but she did get a little hostile. But the inmates, the participants, not a drop. So a safe space, what helps is the structure. There's an hour. There are mats. We do the same practice. We do a very similar practice every time so they can just get more and more familiar with it. I ask that everybody be silent during the deep relaxation, and then they leave. And oddly, there was just nothing unsafe. I just never felt unsafe. And I hope that the inmates felt safe. And I think giving those options helps them to feel safe. They don't even have to stay. They can, that's what I say too. If you need to go for any reason, just call a corrections officer and have them take you back to your pod. This isn't to say, I guess one thing that is challenging sometimes, and I found this more with the women participants than the men, they got really chatty. And so I had to work with that. But I ended up learning that almost every single female incarcerated person is a victim of physical and or sexual abuse, almost 100%. And so for us to ask them to get into their bodies, that is a very risky thing. To feel their bodies, to notice their bodies, we're asking for a lot. And that can send them into a lot of verbal evasion, just talking constantly, so that they don't have to focus on the body. And I'll say, and I sat with this for 2 years. How can I help my female students? I did less and less and less and less. Sometimes we just lie on the ground. Sometimes I would go to their pod and they'd be on their mats for a lockdown, and I would walk them through a guided relaxation. I didn't even ask them to move anymore, because everything, just the body was not safe. And that's the story of trauma, right? The body was not a safe place to be. So we fly up into the head. We'll live up here instead. We won't be in the body. And then the head is not a safe place to be at all. And so we'll just dissociate. It's perfect. We'll just take drugs and dissociate. It's a great solution until it's not. And then yoga is so perfectly poised to draw them back into the body in a safe way, but it has to be done so delicately. So I learned over the course of 2 years about creating a safe space in particular for them. And I was still working on it when we got shut down for the pandemic. But thank you for your question.
And thank you for bringing in this trauma-informed modality, right? Because part of being a facilitator is not being part of the hierarchy. So it's not, so I love as a solution of creating a safe container is that you give people options, right?
Yeah.
It's simple things like you did this morning. Like I offer for you to keep your eyes open, or you're welcome to close your eyes, right?
Yeah.
And so all of these, it's very multifaceted in the ways that we are holding a space.
Yeah. And I don't want to, that's beautiful, Blair. And I don't want to suggest that I am outside of benefiting from that kind of language. And I mean, I think in yoga was the first time I had felt a safe space. I think with trauma-informed yoga, this is the first time that I had been offered an invitation and options. And we know that traumatized people were not given options to be traumatized or not. And so the whole practice can be, if we just take, like I have to get in my forward folds and my sun salutations, and we got to do the hip openers, if we can put that aside for a second and say, that invitation, that offering, those options, is the whole thing. That's the lake, and the yoga is just the long-legged flies on top. The compassion, the kinship, that's the river. and the yoga, the poses, the asana practice, that's just skimming. It's just that's what we walk in with. Safe space, bowl, container. I love that about it.
And you're giving people the option to, like, you can come and drink from this lake. You can come sit next to this lake. You can stare at how beautiful it is. Like, you're giving people different ways to interact with the lake.
Yeah. And another thing that you're giving them, which is because we have to admit that we have to acknowledge that 65% of people who are currently incarcerated meet the DSM-5 criteria for addiction, 65%. Another 20% are in for drug or alcohol-related charges. So we likely have 85% of 2.3 million people who are in there with an addiction, with an issue with addiction. What is addiction? Well, it's evasion. It's fight or flight. It happens in the midbrain. It happens below the level of consciousness. It happens with the pleasure pathways, the dopamine. And in the genius of our design, pleasure pathways are also for survival. And so it's what's happening to them is below the level of consciousness. And so, and the damage and the healing must also be at the level below conscious thought. And so yoga steps right in and goes right for that midbrain. And by the offering, by the safe container, it's almost I'm just thinking of this one. Adam was a student of mine, and he said that he found a transcendental high from yoga, the thing that he had been looking towards drugs to do for him. He found it in yoga and meditation. And this is a guy who's doing headstands in solitary. I mean, like, he took that book. I gave him one of the Prison Yoga Project books. That thing was dog-eared and just, worn down by the time he was done serving his time. But so we have people who are looking to transcend, as people have been doing since the beginning of people. And we offer them something that has no side effects, no negative side effects. It's not illegal. It doesn't require a doctor. There's no pill. There's no expense. They carry it with them wherever they go. It's inside of them. So we're offering them basically this pharmacy. And that's just kind of the beginning of what we can, this empowerment that we can give to them to heal themselves.
Do you have plans this afternoon? I mean, we could keep going for hours.
Just
really.
all day.
Yeah,
it's no problem.
Please.
It's fine. I love it.
Thank you so much for being here, Miranda.
It's my pleasure.
we had a couple unanswered questions, but maybe we can do some housekeeping, and then I want to honor everyone's time. I want to honor your time. Thank you for being here. This was the perfect way to start our Monday.
Blair, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I feel so full right now. I just, it was a great honor to be here talking about this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll do a little housekeeping and kind of tell you some things that are happening within Prison Yoga Project. As you may or may not know, we have launched our own 200-hour trauma-informed social justice yoga teacher training that will be starting in June. And Priscilla has just dropped the course description in, and Shonda and Jen, who are here as part of our Sangha, they will be the facilitators for our yoga teacher training. So really looking forward to having that Sangha complete. If you're interested or feel pulled, I see Do was here too. She was part of the yoga teacher training info session. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. We also have a foundational training. So if you are already a yoga teacher, what our foundational training offers is kind of an 8-week immersive program that you can participate in online on your own time. And it helps really establish this view of trauma-informed yoga for people who are experiencing incarceration, or really yoga as service for any marginalized population. So again, this is a way for you to establish the view. In Buddhism, we have the Eightfold Path, and we always talk about, at least we as in some social sanghas, part of the path, the first one is view, that it's the most important that our view needs to be established, and everything can grow from this view. And that meditation is actually the last check off of the Eightfold Path, right? Like get all of your other ducks in a row and then sit and meditate, right? And then have your meditation practice. So really love coming back to these, the old ways, the old checklists. Thank you for being here. Again, if you're part of our community membership on our website too, you do have an opportunity to be a free guest, but we also encourage people to come in at a community supporter rate. It's about $25 a month and supports programming like this. So thank you, everyone, for being here. We've got really beautiful comments. Miranda, you have inspired me this morning. Thank you for sharing your bright light with us. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you, PYP hosts and guides. Oh, guides. Oh, I love that. I'll be a PYP guide. Yes. Thank you for that language. People are just stopping in and saying thank you and deep blessings. So thank you, Miranda.
Oh, my pleasure. You all be well. I'm sending warmth, love as you walk your path.
And I do feel called to just take one more minute of your time. Any parting gifts, any parting wisdom that you want to share or rain down upon us today?
Well, it came up. I just was thinking about namaste, that word, because of course the light in me sees, bows to, and reflects the light in you, those verbs. It's really kinship. It's what we're doing. The light in me sees, bows to, and reflects the light in you. And then, because it knows it is the same light. And that is kinship too, for me. I feel like it's all contained within that word.
And I feel like when we are able to really step in and open to this kinship of other, right, of our human family, then it also creates this foundation to really open up to the kinship of the planet.
Yeah.
Right. That we can release
Beautiful.
to that this is all source, right? That this is all kinship. And so really this path of walking the Dharma, this path of walking yoga and meditation is really this kinship for all beings.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste.